If you think your dating life is exhausting, let me introduce you to a little Australian marsupial that takes giving it your all to a whole new and very final level. It's called the antechinus, and it looks like a cute, harmless mouse. But behind those beady eyes is a ticking hormonal time bomb, because for the males, mating season isn't just about romance, it's a death sentence. Once the season kicks off, these guys go full tilt. We're talking marathon mating sessions with as many females as possible, sometimes for 14 hours straight. No naps, no snacks, no water breaks, just an all-consuming reproductive rampage. And here's the kicker. It destroys them from the inside out. Their immune system crashes, their organs start failing, their fur falls out, and yet they keep going until they literally drop dead. It's not an accident either. Evolution designed them to burn bright and then disappear. Which raises a pretty big question. Why would nature create a mammal that's basically programmed to die right after sex? Yeah, let's talk about that. At first glance, the antechinus doesn't exactly scream prehistoric death ritual. It's about the size of your average pet hamster, with a fuzzy coat, pointy nose, and beady black eyes that say, "I enjoy eating insects and minding my own business." If you saw one in the wild, which you probably wouldn't because they're nocturnal, you might think it's just another rodent. Except it's not a rodent at all. It's a marsupial, related to quolls and Tasmanian devils, and like many Australian animals, it hides a pretty bizarre secret. These little guys live scattered across Australia, from coastal forests to scrubby inland areas. They're insectivores, which means they spend most of the year hunting moths, beetles, and spiders, chewing through a respectable amount of protein for something that weighs less than a chocolate bar. For most of their short life, things are pretty uneventful. Sleep during the day, hunt at night, avoid becoming a snack for owls, snakes, or cats. But once a year, everything changes. Around late winter to early spring, depending on the species and location, the air fills with a certain tension. It's mating season, and for male antechinuses, this is it. No second chances, no maybe next year. Their entire evolutionary program is built for this single make-or-break breeding window. And if you're imagining a few days of chasing females around and calling it a job well done, you're underestimating the level of chaos we're dealing with here. See, male antechinuses have one goal: mate with as many females as possible in a ridiculously short amount of time. And they are, let's just say, thorough. These mating bouts can last for hours, and not just once a day, multiple times, with multiple partners. They don't eat, they don't rest, they don't even groom themselves. Every ounce of energy is redirected toward reproduction, as if their bodies have decided, we're not here for a long time, we're here for a very intense time. What makes it stranger is that scientists didn't actually figure out what was happening at first. When researchers noticed that every adult male in a population would suddenly vanish after the breeding season, they initially suspected disease outbreaks, environmental toxins, or even predation spikes. But no, they were literally watching natural selection at work. These males weren't being killed by outside forces. They were being destroyed by their own biology. And it's not like the females get off easy. They have to deal with the frenzy, then carry the pregnancy, and then raise a litter entirely on their own because the dads are, well, dead. But the whole system somehow works. Populations don't crash. In fact, they thrive. Which makes the antechinus one of the weirdest case studies in evolutionary strategy you'll ever see in a mammal. Before we dive into the actual death spiral, and trust me, it's messy, we need to understand what happens during those few weeks when the antechinus turns from an adorable bug hunter into the marsupial equivalent of a rock star on a month-long tour with no sleep, bad catering, and way too much adrenaline. Because once that switch flips, there's no going back. When the breeding season hits, male antechinuses basically become furry little disasters in motion. There's no pacing themselves, no Save some energy for tomorrow. No strategic thinking. It's a biological blitzkrieg. Find a female, mate for hours, stumble off, find another female. Repeat until the universe or your internal organs say, yeah, we're done here. And when I say hours, I mean it. A single session can last up to 14 hours, an unbroken marathon of reproductive effort. To put that in human terms, imagine running a triathlon while fasting, then immediately doing it again without sleep. Now add in the fact that your hormone levels are spiking so hard they're actively sabotaging your health. That's the antechinus lifestyle for about 2 to 3 weeks a year. The main culprit here is testosterone. During breeding season, male antechinuses experience a massive hormonal surge. Think all the Red Bull in the world levels of hyperdrive. And that triggers a cascade of biological chaos. Testosterone fuels their relentless mating drive, but it also spikes their cortisol, the stress hormone. And here's the problem. When cortisol levels stay sky high for too long, your immune system packs its bags and leaves. With immunity out of the picture, infections move in like it's an open house. Cuts and scrapes from fights with rival males, they get infected. Internal damage from physical exhaustion, no repair crews on duty. Even minor parasites that normally wouldn't be a problem suddenly have the green light to wreak havoc. And because they're not eating or sleeping, their bodies are burning through every reserve of energy they have. Muscle tissue, fat stores, even the proteins needed for organ function. The result? A rapid physical decline that would be tragic if it wasn't so, well, bizarrely intentional. Fur starts falling out in patches. Open sores appear. Their weight plummets. They get so weak that basic coordination goes out the window. Yet they still manage to drag themselves into another mating session. You have to almost respect the commitment, even if it's objectively the worst life plan ever. Why not take a break and recover? Because evolution didn't give them that option. The antechinus mating strategy is an all-in gamble. Males live less than a year, so there's no evolutionary reward for sticking around after the breeding season. Their best shot at passing on their genes is to mate with as many females as possible, flooding the next generation's gene pool with their DNA. And that means sprinting, not jogging, to the finish line. If you're thinking, well, surely some males survive, the answer is nope. By the end of the season, every single male in the population is dead. Females, on the other hand, live longer, up to 2 or 3 years, because they actually need to survive long enough to raise their young. But their partners? Gone before the joeys even poke their heads out. In a strange way, it's the ultimate bachelor party. Non-stop indulgence, total physical ruin, and no one making it home in one piece. It's just that in this case, nature wrote the guest list, handled the invitations, and set the dress code to cute but doomed. The really wild part? This kind of reproductive burnout isn't unique to the antechinus, but in mammals, it's almost unheard of, which makes you wonder why this strategy exists at all, and how it could possibly be a good idea. By the time week 2 of breeding season rolls around, male antechinuses are basically running on fumes and stubbornness. They've been in a constant loop of mate, wander, mate, collapse, repeat, and their bodies are starting to come apart like an old car held together with duct tape and optimism. What makes it so brutal isn't just the speed of the breakdown, but the fact that the whole thing happens while they're still actively trying to reproduce. Imagine coughing up blood mid-sentence on a first date and just continuing anyway. Yeah, that's where we are. The immune system? Gone. Infections take root everywhere. Mouth ulcers, festering wounds, skin infections that spread unchecked. Their fur starts to thin and fall away in clumps, leaving bald, irritated patches. Some males are seen stumbling or moving sluggishly, their muscles wasting away, because by now they're cannibalizing their own tissue to keep the lights on, and those lights are flickering. Internally, things are even worse. Chronic stress from relentless cortisol flooding their system means their heart, liver, and kidneys are being pushed well beyond safe limits. Internal bleeding isn't uncommon. Some males have been found with severe stomach ulcers, while others have hemorrhaging in their brains, but the drive to mate overrides everything. So they push on, dragging battered bodies into one last courtship attempt. This isn't just bad luck. It's called semal parity, a reproductive strategy where an organism breeds once, invests all possible resources into that effort, and then dies. It's common in salmon, certain spiders, and many plants. But in mammals, it's practically unheard of. The antechinus is one of the very few to take this evolutionary route, and it's as extreme as it gets. So why did evolution go with this live fast, die immediately after approach? It comes down to competition and opportunity. In the wild, life expectancy for small mammals is already short. Predators, harsh climates, and limited resources mean most don't make it past a year. For males, the best chance to leave a mark on the gene pool is to go all in during that single window when every female is ready to breed. Instead of pacing themselves and risking other males taking their place, they gamble their entire existence on overwhelming the field in one furious burst of reproductive energy. The thing is, semal parity doesn't just happen because it's dramatic. It actually works. For the population, not the individual. Females end up with multiple partners, increasing genetic diversity in their litters, and with all the males dead afterward, there's less competition for food and territory when the young are born. Nature doesn't care about how tragic it looks. It cares about numbers and survival rates. From a human perspective, the whole thing feels like some grim biological slapstick, a horde of cute little marsupials running themselves ragged, disintegrating in real time, yet still determined to finish the job. And the weirdest part? They're not suffering in the way we'd imagine. Their bodies are too far gone to register pain the way we do, and their brains are locked into that final reproductive mission. When the season ends, the aftermath is almost eerie. Females go on to build nests and carry their young, while the forest floor is littered with the still forms of every male who participated in the frenzy. It's a clean sweep, like nature's own version of, "Thanks for your service, you can go now." But here's the kicker. This isn't a quirky modern oddity. The roots of this brutal system may stretch back millions of years, hinting that it's been a winning evolutionary ticket for far longer than we've been around to witness it. On the surface, the antechinus lifestyle looks like a cosmic prank. Why would nature go to the trouble of creating a perfectly functional mammal only to have it self-destruct after its first mating season? But once you look at the cold, math-driven logic of evolution, the whole thing starts to make sense, in a way that's both clever and unsettling. Let's start with the concept itself, semal parity. In biology, this is a one-and-done reproductive strategy. Reproduce once in your lifetime, pour every ounce of energy into it, and then check out. You've probably seen it before in salmon, which spawn upriver and die immediately afterward. Octopuses do it too, with females literally starving themselves while guarding their eggs. Insects like praying mantises and mayflies have perfected it. But mammals? They're usually on the other side of the spectrum, following heteroparity, breeding multiple times across their lifespan. That's why the antechinus is so rare. It's one of the very few mammals to throw itself into the semal parity category. So, why go this route? It comes down to 3 evolutionary pressure points: lifespan, environment, and competition. 1. Short lifespan. In the wild, small mammals rarely get a long run. Predators, disease, accidents, you name it. For a male antechinus, the odds of surviving to see a second breeding season are already slim. Evolution's take? Why save resources for later if there probably won't be a later? By front-loading all reproductive effort into a single season, the male maximizes his genetic output in the short time he's guaranteed. 2. Brutal competition. Breeding season is a narrow window. Every female comes into heat at roughly the same time, which means the competition for mates is like trying to get front row tickets at a one-day-only concert. It's now or never. Instead of conserving energy, males take the nuclear option, mate with as many females as possible, for as long as possible, without stopping. Even if it kills them, which, spoiler, it will, the strategy floods the gene pool with their DNA before rivals get a chance. 3. Environmental constraints. Antechinuses live in habitats where resources aren't exactly overflowing year-round. Having all the young born at the same time, right after the breeding frenzy, ensures that food availability lines up with the period when mothers need it most. And with every male dead after breeding season, there's less competition for those resources. For the females and their offspring, this is a win. For the dead males? Well, thanks for your sacrifice. Here's where it gets interesting. This isn't just about antechinuses being weird. Similar strategies may have existed in ancient mammals. Fossil evidence from some prehistoric marsupials suggests extreme stress-related bone wear and tear in males, which could be signs of intense, short-lived breeding behavior. In other words, the mate until you break lifestyle might not be a quirky modern fluke, but a survival tactic that's popped up multiple times in mammalian history whenever environmental conditions made it worth the trade-off. It's also worth noting that semal isn't better or worse than iteroparity, it's just different math. For long-lived species, investing in multiple breeding opportunities makes sense. For short-lived species in competitive environments, burning out in one glorious reproductive blaze is often the winning move. From an evolutionary standpoint, the male's survival beyond breeding season is irrelevant. Natural selection doesn't care if the strategy looks reckless or even tragic to us. If it works, it stays. And clearly, it's been working for the antechinus for a very, very long time. Which brings us to the bigger question. Could other mammals adopt this same strategy in the future? Under the right environmental pressures? Absolutely. Evolution has a knack for dusting off old tricks when the situation calls for it. The antechinus might not be alone forever. It could just be the latest chapter in a very old playbook. The antechinus might feel like a modern-day oddball, but the idea of an animal mating itself into the grave isn't some quirky 21st century invention. Nature's been experimenting with this burn bright, die young tactic for millions of years. And if you look closely enough, the fossil record might just spill some prehistoric tea. Here's the tricky part. Fossils don't exactly come with a cause of death tag. You can't dig up a skeleton and have it whisper, "Oh yeah, I died because I couldn't stop flirting." But paleontologists can still piece together patterns by looking at age structures, stress markers, and wear and tear in ancient bones. Take prehistoric marsupials from the Miocene epoch, around 23.5 million years ago. Fossil deposits in Australia show an unusual abundance of adult females and juveniles compared to adult males, almost like the males had vanished after a certain point in their life cycle. In some sites, male remains show heavy bone microfractures, signs of chronic stress, and even lesions that could indicate suppressed immune systems. Sound familiar? That's basically the antechinus's calling card, just preserved in deep time. And it's not limited to marsupials. Some ancient monotremes, the egg-laying cousins of today's echidnas and platypuses, may have had similar mate-hard, die-fast lifestyles. Although the evidence is fuzzier, researchers have found fossilized monotreme populations with the same weird male-to-female imbalance, hinting that semal might have popped up in multiple mammalian lineages over the ages. If we zoom even further back, the strategy gets more obvious in non-mammals. Ancient salmonid fossils show that semal was already going strong tens of millions of years ago. Those fish were doing the same upstream dash and die routine long before humans were around to marvel at it. And in prehistoric cephalopods, we see evidence of mass die-offs after spawning, with entire populations of squid-like creatures fossilized together in shallow seas. their life cycles ending all at once. So why would a short, intense breeding season keep showing up through evolutionary history? The answer's in the environment. In harsh or highly seasonal habitats, synchronized birth timing is a massive advantage. All the young arrive when food is plentiful, predators are busy elsewhere, and environmental conditions are optimal. In these conditions, sacrificing the survival of one gender, usually males, actually increases the odds that the next generation will make it. It's also worth remembering that ancient Australia, where the antechinus' ancestors evolved, wasn't always the land of gum trees and kangaroos. Millions of years ago, it swung between wet, lush forests and arid, food-scarce landscapes. In those lean times, a breed once go-all-out strategy may have been the only way for some species to keep their genetic line going. And here's the kicker. Once seminal parity evolves in a lineage, it's surprisingly persistent. Even if conditions improve, the strategy can stick around simply because it's still working well enough. That's probably why the antechinus hasn't ditched it after thousands of generations. So, when you look at this tiny marsupial's over-the-top mating death march, you're not just seeing a weird modern mammal. You're looking at a living fossil of an ancient survival strategy, one that's popped up again and again in Earth's history whenever life had to make a choice between playing it safe or going all in. And clearly, all in keeps winning. Here's the thing. The antechinus' self-destructive love life is brutal, but it's also perfectly tuned to the environment it evolved in. The problem is, that environment is changing. Fast. Climate change, habitat loss, and the general chaos humans bring to ecosystems are starting to mess with the delicate timing of the breeding season. And for an animal whose entire survival strategy depends on a razor-sharp schedule, even a small shift can be catastrophic. In the wild, breeding is supposed to line up with a sweet spot in the year when food is at its peak, just as the females are carrying young and about to raise them. But warmer winters and earlier springs are throwing this off. In some places, males are starting their death sprints before peak food availability, meaning females end up with hungry joeys and not enough resources. And since the males don't live long enough to try again next year, there's no margin for error. Habitat fragmentation is another punch to the gut. When forests are cleared or broken up by roads and farmland, the population gets split into smaller, isolated groups. That not only reduces genetic diversity, it also makes it harder for males to find enough females in their one and only season. Imagine burning yourself out in 2 weeks just to mate with 1 or 2 partners instead of a dozen. Evolutionarily speaking, that's a waste of a perfectly good death. Conservation efforts are in a weird position here. Unlike species where humans step in to stop the death spiral, the male antechinus' demise isn't the problem. It's literally how the species works. So conservationists focus on protecting habitat, ensuring food supply, and keeping populations stable enough that the system can run as it always has. There have even been breeding programs for endangered antechinus species, carefully managing the timing so the females survive, and the males, well, fulfill their evolutionary contract. Then there's the human reaction. People fall in love with how cute the antechinus is. Those tiny noses, bright eyes, and fuzzy bodies. And then instantly recoil when they hear about the suicidal mating thing. It's the kind of fact that goes viral online because it's equal parts adorable and horrifying. You can almost hear the collective, "Wait, what?" across social media every time a new article about them drops. Even scientists get caught up in the absurdity. You can read peer-reviewed papers that sound like they're trying really hard not to laugh while describing complete systemic collapse due to excessive copulation. It's hard not to see the comedy in it, even if the biology behind it is serious business. And here's where it hits you. For all the weirdness, the antechinus is a success story. They've been running this exact playbook for thousands of years. They're not extinct. They're not in evolutionary trouble because of their death after mating strategy. They're in trouble because of us. If we give them the stable habitats and seasonal cues they've relied on since their ancestors were scurrying around prehistoric Australia, they'll keep doing their dramatic annual disappearing act long after we're gone. So yeah, it's tragic, it's absurd, it's borderline metal. But in the eyes of evolution, the antechinus isn't a doomed romantic. He's a champion sprinter who knows the finish line is also the cliff's edge, and he's totally fine with that.